Hello everyone, this is update for September 17, 2024, day 937 of the war and of the date update. Also catch up for September 16 and 15. I'm going to start with a macroeconomic update, and then we're going to switch to the situation on the battlefield in Ukraine. I probably will mention about the situation about Israel as well. And then we're going to switch to Ukraine. So first, and actually the only topic is actually Japan. Japan is becoming very, very important in the functioning of the world economic system and financial system of the West. It wasn't important. The point I'm trying to make is that potential fragility of Japan may actually create huge problems for Western financial system and actually coherence of the West and basically lead to very negative cascading economic developments in the West and across the world. And the reason for that is actually there are export and import numbers and trade balance of Japan that were just released. There is a preliminary numbers, so they're not perfectly precise. They probably will be fine-tuned a little bit later in the coming weeks and months. But the point is that that the trade balance is negative. That's a key point here. It's in billions of Japanese yen. Here are the numbers. And this is basically highly unusual situation for Japan. And Japan had for a while negative trade balance, as you can see in July as well. What this truly means from a finance and economic perspective. Japan is used to be exporter, and so they process raw materials and everything in semi-finished good from various places, and then they export high value add products across the globe, and they essentially live off this processing, call it fee, which is then its difference between export and import, meaning export is higher than import, and that's your net value add that Japanese economy is producing, and that was basis for the values of Japan. Very similar model to what China is doing, except China is specializing on sort of more lower end, lower quality, maybe not even lower end at this point, because China moved into advanced manufacturing and also advanced products, but the quality is still not quite there relative to Japan. Japan is definitely beating China in terms of quality of the product. Obviously, it's also a little bit more expensive. And so what Japan used to do, so this earned capital, this difference between export and import, they would typically supply to the US, which is capital deficient, basically. And it was sort of similar situation was, let's say, with Russia, except the source of wealth was actually exporting natural resources. Similar situation was with China, except China quite long time ago started diversifying, and instead of providing capital to the US, they started buying up natural resources, literally like entire countries in Africa and across the world, basically. So they decided, instead of holding US government debt, which is called treasuries, they decided to buy real assets with the money they earn, let's say from the US or from Europe, basically from the West. So that was the biggest sort of problem in the world system, the way it works, because the way it works is all of this export-oriented countries, they obviously earn capital with their export, and then they turn around and provide that capital for the US, so the US then basically can consume. And that was how the system was built, really, from from since the end of World War II. It's basically Bretton Woods system with modifications in 70s, but that's how it functions, and it's important for functioning of the system that every sort of country is able to do what it does. It's basically every country is kind of like a cog in the bigger system, and it has its role and supposed to function in a certain way. So basically, in some ways, the system is extremely rigid. So if you take one cog, which is, let's say, in case of Japan, in this case, the whole system may collapse. And that's where the problems are. So the first now problems, it started with China, as I stated a while ago. So probably starting sometime from 2006, 7, 8, when they started diversifying into buying up assets, especially in Africa. Especially natural resources. That's Chinese interest. And now this problem got to Japan, where it's not that Japan, wants to buy any sort of natural resources. It's simply the economic and competitive environment is changing, so that Japan is not able to actually earn the premium that they used to earn by exporting its products, and so and also increase in natural resources prices, basically squeezing Japan net margins, that's the trade balances of this net margin that become negative, and because of that, Japan simply cannot provide capital to the US, and Japan used to be large provider of capital to the US. Along with China, as I stated, and China obviously long time not doing that. They stopped doing, and they're actually selling off their treasuries slowly but surely. That by itself is not creating as much problem, but Japan is also, I think, one of the largest holder of U.S. treasuries, and this situation will force them eventually to sell treasuries to finance this negative results, basically, right? So it will be outflow of capital from the US, and that will create pressure on US dollar. And the more important part in all of this is that US central bank will probably, well, no, not will probably, for sure, will reduce interest rates tomorrow. It's only a question, is it going to be 0.25% or 0.5%? They themselves they're not sure how it's going to play out. But whatever it's going to be, it's basically lower interest rates in the US. Japanese interest rates, while they low, they were a little bit up, and so the most important part is differential between US and Japanese interest rates, and differential is becoming smaller between the two, and that really what this really means. There is even less incentive for Japanese to hold their capital in the US. There is more incentive to basically repatriate the capital, and not only even to just finance this deficit, but simply diversifying into gold. So basically, we're getting into the situation of extreme turbulence in the global financial system, because Japan is just one example in this whole system of cogs. The bigger even problem on the horizon is that if in the U.S. Republican Party wins during the presidential election and parliamentary election, they intend to basically put tariffs if that's the case, Japan is going to be really in extremely bad situation. That may trigger literally depression in Japan, because Japan is living off supplying goods to the U.S. And let me show this, so it will become very clear. So, um, so Japan is exporting something to, some goods to Asia, but mostly it's Hong Kong, Taiwan, South Korea. Well, actually, they're buying from China, but the whole net picture is Asia is where Japan earns money. However, if we look, the only other place where Japan is earning is U.S. So essentially, without export to the U.S., Japan will simply implode as a country. It's already imploding. So all I'm trying to explain is that right now it's already imploding, and if there are barriers and tariffs on the trade between two countries, it's mostly on the export of Japanese products to the U.S. This will accelerate the implosion of Japanese economy, and that can literally trigger significant financial event in the global markets, and obviously in the U.S. Mostly. And the reason I'm explaining that, the reason I'm saying that Japan is so dependent on the U.S. is because then if we look other places, so Japan is importing probably coal and things like of that nature, basically natural resources from Australia. It actually importing products from from Europe. So surprisingly, actually, it's not the place. Europe is not the place where Japan is earning money or capital. Also, even for example, Russia, they importing natural resources, and the biggest sort of expense item for Japan is obviously oil, natural gas, and so on from the Middle East. As you can see, all of this UAE, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, Oman, all of these countries are basically energy exporters to Japan. So if you take away US from this equation is becoming catastrophic for Japan. And obviously implosion in Japan will trigger implosion in the US and around the globe, because if you look at the GDP, it's 4.2 trillion, probably a little bit more right now. It's similar in size to Germany. I think actually a little bit bigger than Germany, but they go sort of neck to neck, roughly the same size, roughly the same importance for the global economic system. And this obviously will create huge problems. Also, as you can see, this will also have negative effects on Europe, because Japan is a significant buyer of products from Europe. Obviously, this will have tremendous effect on energy prices in general, including crude oil in the world. So again, so I'm just trying to explain that the way the situation is developing in Japan, it's let's say disaster in the making, and this disaster can really become reality after, depending on the result of elections in the US. Now, a little bit I want to mention about the situation around Israel. I mentioned. So basically, everybody have seen this special operations by Israel in Lebanon against Hezbollah. At the same time, I don't think, and also former Russian Minister of Defense is in Iran, negotiating with the Iranian president, and Hezbollah is basically affiliate of Iranian government. At the same time, I don't think Iran and Hezbollah will attack Israel. And they did not attack the previous time, and the reason is because they probably waiting to complete their first nuclear bomb, and so because if they attack, they understand there will be retaliation by Israel, and probably Western powers as well will get involved, and so that may completely destroy or derail their nuclear bomb program. So for that reason, they probably holding on, even though this is serious insults, serious loss of reputation, which is in the Near East and Middle East is extremely important. It's almost it means almost nearly death. Yet they willing to sort of take those hits to their reputation because they have much more important thing that they basically going after. So just a quick update on that. Now let's move to the situation in or around Ukraine now, because there's also Russia involved. Gonna do it in a clockwise fashion, the way I always do, starting with Kursk region. I mentioned in a prior video that Russian troops counterattacked, then Ukrainian forces also attacked in attempting to stall Russian counterattacks. So they attacked towards Glushkovo, but they got stopped in this village Vesela. The same also true actually for Russian forces. They got stopped. I cannot confirm if they Russian troops fully control, let's say, Lyubimivka or not, but it appears that these three villages are still in Ukrainian hands, meaning Tolsty Lug, Darino, and Nikolaevo Darino. The key point in this whole situation is that it appears Russian forces don't have enough resources to successfully push Ukrainian troops out of Kursk region. So this is going to be a slow motion sort of fight that will last for a while. Actually, I forgot to mention that Russian president increased Russian army to active sort of members or active military personnel, basically soldiers or people who actually do the fighting, to 1.5 million. Prior number was, I think, 1.3 and 20,000, and prior to that was, I think, roughly 1,100. Prior to that was roughly 900,000. So as you can see, since the beginning of the war, Russian army grew by roughly 600,000 soldiers. So this is actually those who fight, because there is another layer of all sorts of administrative personnel, logistical support, and all sorts of things. That's another roughly 900,000 people. So this number is actually reflecting current state of Russian army, so meaning that it has 1.5 million of active troops on the ground everywhere. So that also means that that losses. So the gross amount increase was much larger than 180,000, because it also had to cover losses that obviously Russian army is sustaining during this war in Ukraine. The number of losses at this point is impossible to have as any level of reliability. I don't think that I think I would say top number for both sides is at most 200,000 people dead, soldiers dead. Probably somewhat less, but it's extremely speculative number at this point because both sides are made this secret, so they're not releasing any source of numbers. So it's as I stated, it's nearly impossible to have any reliable number at this point. But this also means that like going back to this situation with increase of Russian army, this is in some ways is forced increase because Russia now needs to put some troops on border with Finland, with Baltic states. So in some ways, not all of this going towards Ukraine. And the other part of this is that recruitment continues in Russia, so we'll probably also see further increases in Russian army to probably 1.6, 1.7 million of call them soldiers, not totally correct, but personnel that fights. I don't know, that's probably another way to explain what I'm trying to say. So that's really short update on development and on the Russian side. Actually, want to mention development on the Ukrainian side that in some way is mirror opposite of what's going on in Russia. So there are some numbers in Ukraine circulating, also not terribly precise, but I would say there is quite a bit of reliability in them. So the number of soldiers who deserted the units is at least 150,000 and pushing to 100,000. So if the Ukrainian army used to be 1 million, so you can imagine that that net loss just of the people who deserted, at least 150, and many estimate that it's going to be closer to 200,000. So in Ukraine there is sort of development in opposite direction. Now let's keep going. This is the sort of more original situation at the beginning of Ukrainian invasion into Russia. Really situation, as you can see, things didn't change that much drastically. Now let's look at the situation northeast of Kharkiv. Things here also, they are basically frozen. There's nothing is happening here right now. Let's move to the North Lugansk front line. Things here are developing in negative direction, as you can see, for Ukraine. So Russian troops almost managed to reach river Oskil, south of Kupiansk. On its own, it's obviously negative. There's nothing to say about it. At the same time, it's not sort of catastrophic. It's not end of the world. It's unfortunate that Ukrainian front line is going to be split between, so it's not going to be contiguous at this point. At the same time, the way Ukrainian command is sort of fighting, they don't understand movement of reserves and try, basically flexible warfare. So all units anyway static. It's very rigid defense. So it's while it's not positive, Ukrainian command was never able to actually benefit from ability to move troops along the front line in a meaningful way. So, but as you can see, there's nothing sort of positive here on this section of the front line. Now let's move to North Donbass. The northern part is more or less okay. There is Russian pressure, but Ukrainian front line so far holds more or less. But in the southern part, west of Bakhmut, as you can see, Russian troops almost eliminated Ukrainian bridgehead on the eastern side of this uh, Siversky Donetsk channel that's providing fresh water to Donbas region. Now they coming closer, Russian command and Russian troops, to launching this sort of pincer tactic, or where they attack north of Chasiv Yar and south, and effectively force withdrawal of Ukrainian troops eventually from Chasiv Yar. So basically, my prior statement that Chasiv Yar is going to be lost by Ukrainian forces, just a question of time, remains sort of true. But it's going to be just really drawn out sort of development. Could take another 2 months as easily the way it goes. It's just Russian command does not have enough resources here to make decisive moves here. Now let's move to central Donbass front line, where things are really bad and dramatic for Ukraine. There are no meaningful updates in terms of changes of the front line. The only sort of somewhat meaningful update is that Ukrainian forces essentially lost Grodivka, which is a town here where I'm showing. It's on the way to Pokrosvsk. So Russian troops are sort of getting closer and closer towards eventual attack on Pokrovsk, but it's still a little bit. The front line somewhat stabilized with bringing of the reserves by Ukrainian command, and even this semi-encircled group that's it's called Nevelsky Pocket, or almost pocket. It's still there. Troops are slowly withdrawing, but it's not chaotic withdrawal. Russian troops cannot even sort of close this bottleneck. Apparently, they're also pushing with sort of last. Basically, they don't have enough resources to make really quick and decisive moves, because the balance of power right now is not as favorable as it used to be for Russian troops, because Ukrainian side got a little bit more resources on their side. So I mean, again, this is the same situation as I mentioned. Roughly no changes here. The Ukrainian forces slowly pulling out of this pocket. Let's call it Nevelsky, because that's the main village, the main stronghold was there, and essentially this whole area, Girnyk, Kurakhivka, Alexandropol, most likely is going to be lost eventually by Ukrainian troops as well. This is a situation around Vuhledar. Russian troops are advancing west of Vodyane. Don't have exact location, but they probably roughly kilometer west of Vodyane at this point. So this whole situation around Vuhledar looking more and more negative for Ukrainian forces, and that's unfortunate, because Vuhledar is really excellent defensive position. Now let's move to Zaporizhzhia front line. Things here are quiet. Again, both sides don't have resources and to make any active moves here, and actually pulling resources from this section of the front line. And then situation along the Dnipro River is exactly the same as Zaporizhzhia front line. This is basically donor sections of the front line for both sides. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. Until next time. Bye bye.